Greetings and welcome to this all-new exploratory TrapcodeTAO session. First of all, I'd like to give you my sincere apologies because I know I haven't been posting a lot of new contents lately. I've seen that I've got many new subscribers, and some of you might be wondering if I'm still posting new stuff. So here today we're gonna look at something. First, I'd like to share. Let me just tell you that story. I've been working on this project where I have to create visuals for a band that is playing 60s music. So they asked me, can you create some visuals for us? And I, as I always do, began my visual research. Most of you must know about up art because if you've studied art history, well, this must be something that some of your teachers must cover. But in my case, I haven't had any art history teaching, so I'm doing it myself. So upon my daily routine, once I have a subject to explore, to research, because I have to create visuals for it, then I look at artists and I tend to discover new things. So I wasn't really familiar with this before, but I stumble on this and find it particularly interesting. So op art is short for optical art. It's a style of visual art, and it uses optical illusions. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, so you can go and document yourself on this if you want. But in my research, I found it particularly interesting. I mean, just looking at those illusions, I'm just thinking, well, how would it look like to make it in really in motion with that illusion? And because there's already, looking at the static image, let's look at a few, and let's talk about a few artists also that are mainly part of this movement of the 60s. This Bridget Riley, that I just really happy that I've discovered. I previously unknown to me, so I'm sharing this with you guys. If this interests you, please go look it up and look at all that she's done. It's really interesting. And also this guy Victor Vasarely. I was kind of aware of these kind of interesting optical illusions, and some of these styles has made its way on up to now, and I can see some of this influence in some dailies that I look at sometime from random people that are posting daily projects. So here's a nice spirally, if you concentrate on this, there are some really interesting motion. And the other interesting thing about this is that it's all, and look at this, these are straight lines, but your eye looking at this, first of all, I'm having trouble at not seeing any some seasickness feeling or something is occurring when I look at this. And it's mostly easy. It's so simple, so simply, there's no real detail in this. It's simple shapes distributed in some ways that are interesting. So I figured I'd make a little research on this subject and find everything that I can by exploring these extremely interesting pieces and try to put them in motion. So let's see, for example, this Bridget Riley piece. I mean, we can set up something that is not really 2D, and right now these are really two curved pieces of planes, and we're looking on top of it with a camera, so we can go and make some behind the scenes exploratory things. I don't know if it's just me that's crazy, but I just find it interesting to look at these things from different angles and stuff like that. So in conclusion, TrapcodeTAO is really the perfect tool to experiment with that, because it's kind of really quick rendering, and it works directly in After Effects. It's not really expensive of a license compared to traditional 3D software, and since it's nothing really detailed, we don't need a super extreme quality of shadows and lighting and stuff like that. We need to be exploring with basic shapes and flat kind of stuff. So TrapcodeTAO is perfect for that. And there's also specific ways of setting up TAO to make better op art, because it's kind of some optical illusion, 3D effects within 2D patterns. So let's look at how I created this this piece here. So let's do that from scratch together, and hopefully you'll learn something from that and expand it upon yourself. Look, this territory is really big. There's a lot of inspiration to be found everywhere. Optical illusion art is really something interesting that we could altogether revive from its 60s era and bring to the modern, to our actual era. And with the tools that we now have, continue to expand, exploring on that. So let's create a new solid, Control Y, and let's apply tau on that solid. And let's have ourselves a basic sphere. So we can do that, Control Shift Alt L to create a new light. And I'm gonna call this tau sphere, all in caps, and make it a light type, a spot type. And this is basically all the settings. So make sure that you have, if you have changed something, for instance the radius, just the cone angle, I set it at 0 because I don't want this visual guide to be annoying while I work. So Control Shift H to reveal the layer controls. So here we have this, I don't want to see it, so I leave it at 0. So let's put that in the middle of our composition. So we have 180 by 100, 1080 by 1080 comp. So I'm going to make this 540 and put that at 0. And this is the basic donut shape that we get from the path generator. So we're going to just cancel that. And our geometry is coming out from the light. So we're going to tell the light to actually get its size from the radius of the light object. So now I've just quickly twice tapped on A to open up these options here, and we're gonna get in there. And also now if you look at this, how this sphere is facing, now we're looking at from the top pole of it, so we can rotate it 90 degrees to look at it from the front. It's something that we like to do. And let's create our checkerboard texture. So what am I doing? Let's create a new solid, and this one will make it smaller than that. We can make it 512 by 512, which is somewhat of a standard size for applying textures. So let's use that. And let's hit Control Shift C to make it into a to pre-compose it into a new composition, and let's leave the attributes in there. So let's hit OK. We're gonna have that. Let's double click to get inside, and I've just hidden my ruler guide there. Control R. So on this, we're gonna create a new solid. So this is gonna be our black background. We're gonna hit Control Y to make a new solid, call it check, and we're gonna apply the checkerboard effect. It's only 8-bit. Let's apply it. So that's what it makes by default. So we can make bigger by going like this. So let's start by making it the most basic thing to repeat around. So if I put this number here, let's see if we're right on the edge. So we want this to repeat correctly, so we gotta find the exact number right on the limit. So 256, we've got a thin line here, so let's 256.5, and there we can even 25. So at 256, there's this little gap, and we have to put it somewhere at 256.25. It seems that this is what it'll get us, this kind of perfectly tileable. Let's get back in our previous composition. This is what we have here for our texture comp. Let's apply that on our sphere. So I'm gonna get here down in the texture settings, and right on the color texture here under the drop down, we're gonna select our texture comp. So let's add that, and here we have, let's make ourselves a floor also. So multiple ways of doing that. I want it to be part of TAO, so I'm gonna simply make a new light, Control Alt Shift L, let's call it TAO, and this one we'll make it a spotlight. Also, we might want to hit Control Alt O on it to turn off its auto orientation. Make sure it's facing where we want it to face. Let's put it at the center also there. I'm not gonna attach that to any null hierarchy here, just gonna make it move laterally. So let's go up to 300 frames here, and let's say we're gonna move it right 1500 pixel, so right towards this way there. Make sure it's way outside of the comp, and same amount here, but we're gonna subtract, so minus 1500. So we got, this is kind of equidistant, the same distance on each side from the center point, and this is gonna make us a straight line. We could have done it with the line and the particle generator, but I tend to make it a light, so then we can have more control on it. So let's get in the segments. Let's make it 4 segments. It's gonna make it kind of a square shaped thing. We can't remove the chamfer here because we're not gonna especially need it. And now we could repeat this, so multiple ways of doing it. Once again, not one is better than the other. In this case, what we can find out is what stretches it on the X right here, so it's going to fill up our space. We're going to make it unproportionally scaled, really, if we want to keep it keep the numbers like straight like that. So if you have any calculations to make it, it'll be easier to figure out. So here, that's our basic setup there. So now when I work for up art or stuff like 2D in TrapcodeTAO, I found out that the best way of doing that, if we don't want any lightings, any shadows, we want it straight up. So let's set that in the rendering. Let's set it to density, and now we're gonna have a different. This is also interesting to experiment upon. But let's set the normal effect here to 0, and basically we can also remove the ambient occlusion, so that's gonna get rid of all the shadows. And right now we're looking at something that's basically flat with our geometry. So there's our texture here. We can set it to linear, so it's gonna make a better job for the aliasing of it. But also one thing that I found out is when you're using texture, most of the time it's better instead of multi-sample to use the super sample. So let's and we don't even need to put it that high. So at 16, and this at linear, it should look at its greatest. And once again, we can change that if we're not satisfied with the resolution of it, but let's keep it that way. So that's our basic setup. We can duplicate that. Now all this is going to be available. I'm going to put a link in the description down below if you want to get this project file. So let's look into that. New comp. I'm just hit Control D to duplicate this one. Let's look at this one. So also one other thing, when I duplicate, I also tend to duplicate the texture because if I make some changes on it, I'd like to keep my my old one that goes with the old comp. It's kind of a habit that I have to keep incremental versions of the stuff. I'm sure most of you do it also. So let's quickly replace the texture here by holding Alt. Well, this one is selected, and let's replace that. So let's continue our experimentations. let's stretch that. So let's go ahead and now we got a basic way to apply the texture. Let's change this. So here we can quickly stretch on the X and on the Y. Now our comps are really tied together right now because the one which is applied to the floor is pretty much the same that is applied to the sphere. So right here with this kind of ratio, and let's put it to 54. So this is kind of what we get. It's pretty interesting. But what if we really wanted like real 2D? Right now it's kind of mapped, like it still looks like a sphere. It's also a pretty interesting visual effect. I don't know. Let's get in here and well, let's keep that one. I'm gonna still increment that. So let's duplicate, and let's duplicate our texture also. Let's replace that. So we've kept those the same, but if we go back and change something in this, then we change something in the texture, then we go back to the first one, and it's not gonna be affected. So in this one, let's actually change more stuff here. Let's look at other ways to apply the texture. So right now it's set to linear. If we set it to solid face, ooh, this is interesting. Let's, instead of X and Y regular, let's try that. There's other avenues. World X, world Y. Now this other interesting way to put it there, but we still have this curvature. If we really wanted 2D, in fact, we should have something this different than a sphere, and we should have something that's quite flat. So maybe the top of something like the top of a cylinder. So let's once again duplicate this. I want to keep this example. Maybe it's fun. Maybe I want to expand it further on this later. So I'm duplicating this, I'm duplicating this, and let's get to this. We're going to replace that. And let's continue to expand upon this exploration. So right now, I'm going to, instead of use it as a sphere, let's make it a cube. So just replace the word, keep it all caps, and right, what we should have here right now is a cube. This cube is kind of something that I want to make a cylinder. So now it's got 4 sides. Let's try 8, and let's also rotate this. So let's make sure that we hit Control Alt O. We want to make it auto orientation to off, and let's see. I'm just adding more sides here, and it doesn't change anything. So it's keeping on being a cube here. So I'm a little not angry at that, but let's keep this at 4. We're gonna specify this on here in the right by hard coding it in the light object. So let's type down SID semicolon 8, and then it seems that we get something other than this. So make sure we're rotated, and once again, I don't know. You can explore different avenues here, but let's find something that let's make it to have more sides, so we get more something like a circle. There, we got a circle, but the way our textures apply on here, like it's applying to this face of the circle. This is what's called the cap, like the top part of it's like the cap of your jam jar, like it's the top of it. If we remove that, it's gonna become transparent. And by default, let's go back in the texture option here. and by default the caps is set to fan. So what we want to do is make that to full. So right now it kind of appears on there, but one other, it's not a complaint, but one other thing that I would like to be able to do now that I've set it to full, I can't really influence the scaling here with those numbers there. So let's put this back to 1 and 1 here. So I would like some way to be able to it's only stretching what's applied on the faces of geometry that are not the caps. So the caps is kind of stuck to the actual ratio of the texture, if you want to put it that way. So let's change that. We want to be able to get tinier squares in here. So the way we'll have to do it if we apply texture on the caps is by going into the texture here on our checkerboard, and it's real nice because we can still do it parametrically with this. So let's set width and height sliders so we can get unproportional pieces here, and let's make it so like the way we want it to look on our floor. So let's go with this kind of ratio. So I want them to be also make sure that everything's repeating, everything's styling correctly, because if I change it back, I want it, like, I want all my squares to be the exact same size. So let's and I want them to be unproportional. So let's make it this 50, and let's make this 10. So right on top here, I'm just going to verify here that we're so 49. No, it's not this one. So 12, 12.5, 12.25, and it seems that we're pretty much there. So 12.5 is too much. 12.25 is look mostly right. 12.0 is mostly not right, but maybe it's 0.15. No, 0.25. Let's keep it this way. But now on the X, let's find the right number. 52 maybe, and let's do 52.5 and 51.5. We still got room there. 51. Nope. So 51.25, and there we need to make it 51.5. I think this is going to be tiling correctly. And while we're here, let's also have this offset. Now we can also animate the texture settings right in TAO, but since it won't affect what's going on the caps here, if we wanted to move on the caps, we're gonna make this move by moving the anchor point right here. So right again, we're gonna at frame 0, let's click on the stopwatch here. We're gonna make a new keyframe. I'm gonna hit U to reveal it, and let's get on the 10th frame. And right here, the width is this number here, 51.5. The anchor point now, sorry for that. Let's add. So I've copied the value from here, the width there. I'm gonna make a plus sign here, and I'm gonna hit Control V to paste. So plus 51.5. Yeah, but 51.5 multiplied by 2, because or else we're gonna be on a square that's on a different color. So we need to move 2 squares because we've got 2 colors. So right now our 10th frame should be the exact same thing as our first frame, but in between we should have the interpolation. So I'm gonna, if we look at that and we make it loop at frame 9, there we've got some tiling motion, which is gonna be applied right here. So let me hit Control Alt front slash to make sure it's all refreshed, and there we've got some motion. But let's also close the work area here on frame 9. So we only have 10 frames to render. That's pretty cool. All right. So right now we have it on this ratio on the floor. So multiple combinations to set up here, but this is the way I found that we can get some interesting controls on variations on different scaling on the floor here. And so right now it appears to be scaling on the cap, which is something that is pretty interesting, because it didn't seem to do so. Oh, that's because it's set up to be X world Y. So it really does. Forget what I said earlier. It does scale on this. So yeah, if it's set to regular, then it won't influence how the texture is scaling on the caps. But if it's set to some of these other ways to apply texture, which is pretty interesting, just figuring it out now, that this is stretchable even on the caps where your texture is applied. So I don't know, there are probably magic numbers here that you can put that will make it more interesting visually than other. But let's set that to 1 and 1. So now, if I'm putting it this way, it gives me the possibility to change the floor independently from the cap. So this is if you want that type of control. There. And now it's moving on the same direction, and I think it would be really more interesting if it was moving the opposite way on the floor. So let's just select both keyframes for the position on our light, and let's time reverse those, and let's see if that will. Yes. So I've just, by doing that, I've just reversed the way that the texture moves on the floor. So I think that's more interesting. Don't look at that for too long. You might just fall plainly asleep or get hypnotized or something. But yeah, this was a quick little explanation. I don't know, there's like, I'm just opening a door here. There is lots of possibilities of explorations within this subject of art in itself. And well, it's been part of what I've been doing lately. Probably gonna jump to something else soon, but I can tell you that exploring this particular artistic movement, I can say that it brought me more and more knowledge, and like getting into that and making these setups and then exploring further than what you just see in this 2D image. Well, it kind of gave me some kind of new insights on based on simple things. And also one good point about this is that when we output that, and yeah, let's do it together. It's just half an hour, lots of ramblings, but I haven't been there for a while. So let's do it together. Let's make it a GIF. So since we have only 2 colors, now we can make like a really long, lengthy GIF, and bring like we can optimize those GIF really easily, because we don't have any details and we have only 2 colors. So that's another pro of this whole thing. So let's export that. I'm gonna I've got this preset that I've made for myself, but it's 1080 by 1080. Usually when I make GIFs, it's 540 by 540. So if I want the render to go even faster, we can set the resolution to half. So it's gonna make it automatically 540 by 540. Now, if you have something that's detailed, sometimes it might not be exactly what you want to do. You want to export it for full res, but in this case, let's just do it this way. And it's only 10 frames to render, so it's really nothing really demanding for our computer. We're not gonna have time to do many chores or anything while I hit this render button. Let's do it. Yes, and that's the length of a render that I like. So we've got 9 frames. Let's go in Photoshop. So that's where we're gonna open up this. We're gonna select import and video frames to layer. We can't just import simply like a normal thing. Let's double click on that. So it's asking us if we want to import from beginning to the end. We don't need in this case to limit it to limit the frames. We only have 9, so let's do this. We're gonna see we have 10 frames. We're gonna see them right there, and we can hit play here to preview it there, and we can also hit Control Shift Alt S, and that's gonna bring us to this panel here where we can optimize everything. Now by default it should be perhaps not these settings. This reflects what I've been messing around the previous time, but we don't need any transparency in there. We don't need any dithering to be going on. It's set to grayscale because it doesn't matter. We don't have any much more than grays in there. I can set it to black and white, and even if it's gonna make it even tinier. So black and white, this looks correct for this kind of effect. So it's only 93.16K. We've got 2 colors. 1, 2, black and white. So we don't have any dithering, we don't have anything like this. Is going to be the smallest GIF on the whole internet. Is it? Probably not, but we can really, that means that we have only 10 frames. Now we could have like 100 frames. We could even have 360 frames, and it would be in conclusion, we can have a very lengthy GIFs with lots of frames, with lots of variation upon what we're doing, and it would still be able to be posted on Tumblr, which only accepts 1 meg of a animated GIF. Now Twitter made it before. It was 3 megs maximum. Now someone had told me, and I humbly thank him, because now we can set up a GIF of 15 megs. Like the new Twitter limit is 15 megs for a GIF, animated GIF. So I was quite happy to learn that, and now we've been posting a little bit more heavier GIFs because I have the possibility to do that. So it's pretty interesting. But if for some reason we were brought back in the 90s we would like our internet would fail big time. We wouldn't be able to have all these big streamings videos again. Now you would know that you can still post very interesting animation that are very light. 90, not even 100K for this. So let's save that. And this is my old one. I'm gonna save this one now. We could have made a better job. I don't think that we've set up those magic numbers here, but really, if you're into this kind of stuff, I really love these kind of effects. They are simple. They are really doesn't need much detail to be interesting. It's just and it helps like to focus on what's really interesting. Like sometimes it's really cool to see something like really detailed, but for this kind of art, like the illusion, the basic, what you want to focus to that is interesting upon what you experimented on. You don't want to like confuse the focus on, like, we're not looking at detailed ambient shadows on anything. Like we always see is the intent of the effect of animation that we want to experiment on and at the moment or look upon further. So I'm gonna leave it right there, and probably upload some new tutorials very soon. I got a lot of ideas, lots of subject that I want to explore with you guys, and very fun to do it. And thank you to those who have been leaving comments in the video. I cannot tell you how happy I am when I receive comments about someone who who found out new interesting stuff while listening to my videos. So as always, thank you very much for watching and see you next time.